Over the 33-minute NPR Tiny Desk concert you are about to see a clip of, I got my first introduction to Christian Scott aTunde Adjuah, and I have been on a musical and historical journey ever since. The performance sums up why I fell in love with Adjuah as an artist. Through his music and speech, he demonstrates versatility, creativity, and thoughtfulness. This is Christian Scott aTunde Adjuah. Adjuah is a 2-time Edison Award-winning and 5-time Grammy Award-nominated musician, composer, and producer. Born on March 31, 1983 in New Orleans, Louisiana as Christian Scott, he is now known as Christian Scott aTunde Adjuah, as he didn't want to navigate the world as Christian Scott exclusively. In an interview, he says the name was assigned to those before him under bad circumstances. While his forefathers before him decided to keep the name, he didn't want to gift the name of Scott to his children. The two names are from places in the country now called Ghana. Adjuah grew up in the Upper Ninth Ward of New Orleans, an area with a rich history of art, music, and people, but also injustice. William Frantz Elementary School is only 2 blocks away from where Adjuah grew up. The elementary school was one of the first all-white elementary schools to be desegregated in the United States and attended by the civil rights icon Ruby Bridges. Mardi Gras Indians and their traditions date back to the 1800s when Native Americans helped shield runaway slaves. Mardi Gras Indian culture is influenced through the historic relationship between ancestral enslaved Africans and Native Americans. What being a chief means to Adjuah is leading the effort to create a welcome environment and space for the community. One of the ways that he leads is through a nonprofit for cultural retention, where they have programs that teach children everything from West African rhythmic music to fiscal literacy. Adjuah is the nephew of jazz innovator and legendary saxophone player Donald Harrison Jr. His musical journey began under the direction of his uncle at the age of 13. Adjuah toured with Harrison as a trumpet player, even though he wanted to play the saxophone like his uncle. After another member playing with Harrison stopped and they needed a trumpet player. The next stop on his journey would be the Berklee College of Music, where he earned a degree in just 30 months in professional music and film scoring on a full-ride scholarship. Now, you might have a question about the way his instruments look.
I got a question!
To put it succinctly, and in the words of our great professor, hey man, why does Christian Scott have that weird-ass looking trumpet?
Riddle me this, riddle me that.
Well, let me tell you a story. When he was growing up, Adjuah was never a fan of the traditional horn he got at age 12 and would doctor the instrument himself. Starting as a little kid, he took the road less traveled. For example, he had a big dent in his bell and his mother forced him to play with it. From there, he was always interested in changing the sound up but didn't have the tools to do it effectively. Adjuah says another reason why he created his own line of trumpets and all of the other type of B-flat instruments is because, and I quote, I hate the sound of the trumpet. It's terrible. There are 4 instruments in Adjuah's Adams brass line: a tilted bell trumpet, a siren trumpet, a hybrid of a trumpet and cornet called a sirenet, and the reverse flugelhorn Adjuah trumpet. The horn he plays the most, however, is his tilted bell trumpet. He says people at his shows often tell him it looks like Dizzy Gillespie's horn because they both have tilted bells, but Adjuah's trumpet has a less pronounced 22-degree angle. Adjuah is quick to point out that just because they look similar to the naked eye doesn't mean they sound similar. He stresses that they are played quite differently. He describes his own horn as less abrasive, allowing him to get inside the instrument and change the timbre with more ease.
Do you get a lot of surprise reaction from like a younger audience who just kind of seem like the younger generation let go of jazz?
Well, you know, it's strange. Well, you know, the music that we make, they refer to as stretch music now.
Naturally, you may appeal, but I...
Wait. He is.
Right, like me and a guy named Robert Glasper are probably like the main proponents of the music right now. But what it is we're just taking I guess you could say, a more hood approach to jazz now, because that's where it started. But you know, in the last 25 years, they have a movement that they call the neoclassics. That's like with Wynton Marsalis and Terrence Blanchard, and their style of jazz is more of a sort of more like a conservatory type approach. But you know, like I grew up in the Ninth Ward in New Orleans. Robert is from, you know, the Third Ward in Houston. So like we want to make sure that jazz reflects the people that it originally represented.
When he was a kid, he was looking at the world and trying to figure out a way to musically address the fracturing of people in music. Stretch music, in part, is a barrier breaker. meant to eradicate the limited notion of how people are interacting with each other through hyper-racialized ideas. If you don't think it's racialized, Adjuah says, look at a musical genre for an example. If I ask you to visualize a trap musician or a hip-hop musician, you'll see one thing. But if I ask you to visualize a Western classical musician, you'll see a different thing. He posits that a lot of how music is disseminated to us is through this hyper-racialization. The way he's addressing this problem is trying to marry disparate cultures of music together. He says that if he can take traditional Japanese music and mix it with the tenets of Polish folk songs, and mix that with some rhythms from Mali, for example, and then mix that with some trap music, then what we know is that we can create an environment musically that demonstrates we all belong together.